Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Behind Headlines as we discuss the latest Israeli-U.S. strikes to decapitate the Iranian regime, and we've already seen that the Israelis have actually killed the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. Early on Saturday the 28th of March, Israel and the US launched Operation Roaring Lion, deploying over 200 Israeli aircraft in a coordinated attack with the US on the Iranian regime, aimed at bringing about regime change in Tehran. The operation has targeted key figures in the Iranian leadership, including the defense minister, the head of the notorious Revolutionary Guards, conducting 900 strikes on 500 targets. These include the regime's ballistic missile launchers and air defense systems and naval assets. In response, Tehran has initiated missile and drone attacks against Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait, even targeting Cyprus. We have to say, can the courageous Persian people rise up against this regime? And are we seeing the hand of God's wrath being poured out upon the Islamic Republic of Iran? Pastor Tim and Pastor Reagan, I think this is a very special program. This is one I think we've been waiting certainly a very long time to happen. And finally, we're seeing that day of reckoning coming for this Iranian regime.
Well, very definitely, and it's not any exaggeration to say that this is a direct and tangible answer to many, many prayers. I believe it's right to pray for the overthrow of wickedness, and we've been doing that. And this is this is a cause for celebration. Unlike many others, perhaps, that we've had, I cannot think of any better reason to look with hope that the regime of the Ayatollahs in Iran is about to fall.
Absolutely. And what about the timing? I mean, we're now entering into Purim, and Purim is that entire story of God's deliverance for the Jewish people in the ancient Persian Empire, and how God came to their deliverance. And now we're seeing that those enemies who have risen up against Israel to destroy them and the Jewish people are now themselves being destroyed.
Exactly. And again, you know, if you recall back to Nazi days, you can compare this Islamic regime to the Nazis with the same evil, that same spirit. It was Purim 1946 where Julius Streicher famously shouted Purim 1946 because God deals with the enemies of his people, those who seek to make a full end of Israel. God will make an end of them. And that's, you know, you can see that all over the scriptures.
Yeah, very, very definitely. And the scripture that's very, very relevant to that, Esther chapter 9, verse 1 through 4, in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all the people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them.
And as we were just saying, these are historic days when you see what God did in ancient Persia. I mean, it's happening today in Iran. And there's a saying in Hebrew, it's v'nechafochu. I'm trying to say that really carefully. What it means is it has been reversed. And you see that theme of, and picture back to October the 7th, picture to those scenes of the Israelis in bomb shelters and the mourning and the pain. And actually, if you look at the weekend, the previous weekend just gone, there were actually scenes of Israelis in bomb shelters dancing. You have turned my mourning into dancing, sorrow into joy, from death to life. And you see this, you see how God has turned this around. And it's so significant and historic that we're at the Purim festival as well. While we hear that Khamenei's been eliminated, and so many of those Iranian commanders have been eliminated, God will turn judgment on those who seek to make an end of his people. You saw it with the Nazis, the Babylonians, you see it with the Romans, you see it in history, and of course, many of us praying, believing. You don't need to be particularly very prophetic to know this was going to happen, because you just look at history and you see how God has turned it around, and he's making an end of the IRGC regime, I believe.
Well, it's been put that this is a gamble that President Trump and Netanyahu are taking, and I'm reminded of just that gamble that was done in Esther. You know, it's called Purim because of the casting of pur, the casting of lots, right? And so that element of, you know, a gamble, you know, and the fate of the Jewish people being decided on this basis. But we know that the lot is cast into the lap. Every decision is from the Lord, and he's working out his perfect plan and purpose. He's already made the decision, and he's revealed the decision in his word very, very clearly.
I think something's really striking, and certainly in verse 3 of Esther chapter 9 says the following: "And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all of those who are doing the king's work helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them." Now we know that that Mordecai replaced Haman as the Iranian Grand Vizier, as it was, or the Prime Minister, only second in command to King Ahasuerus. And therefore, because he was in that powerful position, that fear of him went out entire empire. And we know that when we start the book of Esther, it starts about how the Jewish people were in fear. They hid their identity. And by the end, they came out triumphant, and everyone was scared of them. And I think now the Iranian regime and these Islamists are scared of Israel and the Jewish people, not because of who they are, but because of the God of Israel who's behind them.
That is absolutely right. And actually something a lot of us have been saying is, hear that call of Mordecai to Esther. He said, listen, if you're silent, God will deliver his people. He will. But if you're silent, you know, maybe you're here for such a time as this. And I believe that was a prophetic call for the church to stand with Israel, to be a comfort from October the 7th onwards, but also a call to world leaders. And you see President Trump responding, you know, and he's responded at this time, actually on Ramadan weekend as well, which is no small thing. And the timing is deliberate, it's tactical. And then we get into Purim, and I hear Mordecai's voice still cry out through the ages to the church, also to Esther, who herself was Jewish, don't forget, and she responded to that call. The lot was cast, and God reversed.
I definitely see that pattern throughout Scripture, that reversal pattern. You see the Hebrews come out of the Red Sea safely, while the Egyptian army, which had thrown Hebrew baby boys into the waters of the Nile, are drowned. You see Saul, with the same sword with which he chased David, take his own life. You see that same pattern repeat. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael are taken by Babylonian soldiers to be thrown into the fiery furnace. They survive, the Babylonian soldiers die. Daniel is thrown into the lion's den. Those who sought his destruction and planned and prepared for these lions to devour Daniel are devoured by the same lions. And then, of course, Esther there in this book of Esther at that time that is celebrated now at Purim, the same exact thing. Haman impaled on his own execution spike, and those seeking their oppression actually becoming the ones who are punished.
And that happens to every single world empire or any nation that comes against God's covenant people. And we see that in history. And now we're seeing the Iranian regime being consigned to the trash can of history. And Tim, just share with your thoughts. I mean, it's a bold move by President Trump. He's full of surprises. He's completely unpredictable. I mean, most US presidents would be told by their special advisors, particularly on the Middle East, do not carry out a military campaign during Ramadan because we don't want to inflame Islamic public opinion around the world. We don't want to see this to be seen as a crusade against the Islamic world. Therefore, a more opportune time would be the end of Ramadan, and then possibly as we head in towards the Persian New Year, which is around the 20th of March. But no, he had the opportunity. I believe that he got intelligence to inform him that the Iranians were planning a preemptive strike against US forces. And so therefore he decided to take that decisive action early together with the Israelis. And this is really ever since June of last year, the first time since the modern state of Israel came into being in 1948 that we're seeing direct military cooperation with the United States and Israel to confront evil.
And it's a powerful, powerful alliance. I mean, you go back to last year, how many Iranian commanders and the leadership structures and their missile programs, etc., were taken out. And President Trump, I mean, obviously, I don't know him personally, but he comes across as someone who doesn't have a problem with courage and conviction, unlike many of our own leaders in the West. I think if he believes in something, and remember he said back in January, if you harm any protesters, I will come and get you. And he went on and murdered tens of thousands of Iranians. And I think President Trump, then things were moving. We saw, you know, even last week and the week before, we were watching the USS General Gerald R. Ford making its way. And you just had the impression when that gets there, I think, you know, the talks are one thing, but you always know with the Iranians, because of this ideology, and they use things like taqiyya and lying, that this is an ideology that trumps everything. You cannot negotiate with terrorists. You cannot negotiate with evil. And I think Trump has shown, actually, he's a man of his word and he's a man of action, which is so important. And my prayer is that actually, you know, many other countries in the West will back this decisive and important action.
Yeah, it's interesting because many people also would not have expected Israel to have partaken in this particular attack at this particular time, not only because it's Ramadan, but the initial strike was in the daytime. Previous attacks have always been at night. They've always, when they've been dealing with this type of scenario, previous strikes on Iran, it was always at nighttime. This was broad daylight in the morning. They never do that. It was on Shabbat. It just doesn't really happen, and so
it did happen.
Yeah, and so it's like you can see it. The Ayatollah and co. The Ayatollah had been rumored to have been holed up in a bunker since last June, and so clearly intelligence showed not. Everyone was in the same place at the same time. Everyone of immediate relevance. It's not fully confirmed yet how many, but it's believed that as many as 400 of Iran's top echelon of its regime were executed on Saturday morning. As many as 400. Phenomenal. It's just absolutely catastrophically effective strategy by Trump and Netanyahu on this one.
Absolutely, and of course we don't know where this is going to lead, and as of this recording we are reporting as we have the information before us, and of course we know that this is a very fast changing events, and events could overtake us by the time this program is aired. Well, let's go and have a look now at US President Trump addressing the world on the announcement of US-Israeli military strikes to decapitate the Iranian regime.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer.
Now, he provided a bit of a history lesson there, really saying how, for example, ever since the Islamic Revolution came to power, 46 years ago that they've launched a war against Israel, they've launched a war against the United States, they have spilled innocent American blood on their hands, and really effectively now time is retribution. And President Trump had given the Iranians plenty of time to come to the table over their nuclear weapons program. They are playing a long game. They wanted to push it into touch, weren't actually serious about the threats posed by the US Armada that we've been reporting for weeks now. And now he took the decisive action on the weekend to strike at the very heart of the Iranian regime.
And of course, President Trump laying out very powerful framework for these attacks, despite, for example, our Prime Minister's questioning of the legality or not understanding the legality, because when you look at history, as President Trump said, Iran has been responsible for multiple bloodshed, not just in the Middle East, in Argentina and American lives. And you remember the British servicemen that were kidnapped, multiple events. This is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, the #1 evil force in the world, and President Trump rightly responding powerfully with the Israelis and laying it out very clearly, so that for all of those who are morally clear and concise in our day, we should be backing this action, this hugely important action.
I struggle with the terminology that some are using of these strikes as preemptive. There's nothing really preemptive about them. And I don't think that there should be any usage of that terminology in this regard. Some are kind of jumping on that, saying, oh, well, this goes against the rules of just war. It doesn't. Some are saying that, no, that this is not how things should, this is not how things should be. And even, our mainstream media asking the question, well, like this came out of the blue. Why did this happen? Where did this start? Why did the U.S. and Israel get involved here? Well, we can just go back. You rightly mentioned, okay, this goes back a long time, but okay, the 7th of October, who backed that? And we were at the time talking about how actually Hamas is the one that jumped the gun. It was meant to be Hamas, Iran, and Hezbollah all together.
Who planned this? Who coordinated these attacks? Who trained the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to carry out the Iranian regime? I think you can call this a preemptive strike because it took them by surprise. Israel carried out preemptive
That's not the definition of preemptive.
War. But it is in a sense preemptive strike because the Iranian regime wasn't prepared for it. Does it have legality? And to say that this is against international law, as we're seeing a lot from a lot of political and military commentators, is outrageous, because we know that if the Iranian regime had the intent and the capability of putting a nuclear warhead on one of their ballistic missiles, you're trying to tell me they wouldn't fire this at Tel Aviv, they wouldn't fire this at Rome, they wouldn't fire this at London or Washington, D.C. Of course they would, because it's in their thinking, it's in their mentality, and so therefore the Iranian regime does pose an existential threat, not only to Israel, but the Arab world, Europe, and also North America as well.
Not just a threat, they've carried it out. Even in the past year, we've seen the past 2 years, we've seen multiple ballistic missile assaults on Israel that were only met with a kind of cautionary targeting of some of their military sites without any, we had a couple of key assassinations, for want of a better term, executions, but we've not really seen anything like this. And this is a nation, we're talking now the UK, there's debate, will the UK get involved, will it not at the time of filming, and we're still piddling about on that. But the Iranian regime backed 20, thankfully, failed, uncovered, potentially lethal plots against the UK.
That's right.
In last year alone, 20.
Including the Israeli embassy, they tried to carry out a terrorist attack against Israel.
There's your legality.
What's going on here? Yep. Why are we not involved? Why were we not involved before now?
Well, we might have to if British bases get attacked in the Middle East and in Cyprus.
Yep.
The Times reported on Monday, the 2nd of March, under the following headline: how Blitz in a broad daylight took the biggest prize of all. It said normally the military hits the enemy while they are sleeping. But in a departure from the shock and awe tactics used during the overnight bombing of Baghdad in March of 2003, the US and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury in broad daylight. It was a calculated move, designed to target the leadership of Iran as they held meetings at the start of the week. The Israeli and US military intelligence had a fix on the Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader since 1989, who had held a vice grip on his country. Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War, described what came next as the most lethal, most complex, most aerial operation in history. According to Israeli military, it was months in the planning. So let's see how this started. So waves of Tomahawk missiles, land attacks, cruise missiles were launched from the US Ali Burke class destroyers for the initial preparation of Tehran's air defences already weakened by last year's June 12-day offensive last June. The low-flying precision weapons travelled at supersonic speed using terrain following navigation, allowing them to evade early warning radar detection by hugging the ground before explosions were reported near strategic locations. Over the next 12 hours, the US carried out nearly 900 strikes from land, sea and air. US F-18s and F-35 fighter jets took off from U.S. Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea, and Israel deployed F-35 fifth-generation stealth fighters capable of evading radar detection and carrying out precision-guided munitions. Its missiles can seek out and destroy radar installations behind enemy lines. So what we're seeing really is that I don't think the world has seen the technology that we have now witnessed. It was almost very similar to that of the first Gulf War in 1990, when the original stealth fighter came out. All this American military hardware and technology was used. I mean, this was months in the planning, but we're now seeing this incredible technology that the Americans, the Israelis have to try and avoid radar.
And what we're seeing here is what we saw just over the weekend, an incredible action which has completely robbed the regime of leadership. The IRGC besieged were scrambling on Saturday and Sunday, and there were some commentators who were saying, okay, we saw a great showing of Iran's capabilities in relation to their ballistic missiles. They were firing off everywhere, and that was coupled with their seeming inability to hit anything of meaningful relevance or impact. Yes, it's impacting people. Civilians are the ones who are being impacted, but there's no dent at all being made in any leadership, in any military infrastructure by these missiles. And in fact, they're harming their own people, with one missile striking a school in the nearby vicinity, killing over 100 kids. So
if that's not deliberate itself, to try and blame this on the US and to blame this on Israel.
There's evidence to show it was.
Because there's a lot of precision guided missiles in all of this. This is modern technology. This is modern warfare. This is how nations like Israel and the United States conduct warfare. And the fact as well, I mean, to target Bahrain and to target Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, also some speculation as well that they've even targeted US bases in Turkey as well as Cyprus now, hoping to draw these nations in a war against the US is doing the opposite.
Well, so do you think that there's a element of these ideologues, and that they're ideologues completely misguided and delusional? Do you think there's a measure of them thinking, let's go ahead and kick off Armageddon. Let's kick off this, in the eschatological mindset of extreme Islamism. Is there some of that at play, do you think, Simon?
I think they just want to hit back, and it's all about pride and arrogance.
Right.
So it's all about showing that kind of strength, that we're not going to take this lying down. And it's very similar to that of the Nazi SS. You know, they were the hardest ones that fought, and this is going to be an epic battle against the IRGC to get them defeated, because there is a satanic forces that are driving this regime that will stay on and try and hold on to power as much as possible. So for them, the Iranian regime, if it survives, that's its victory. And of course is up against unprecedented military power. So let's identify some of the targets over the weekend. So the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps was one of the targets, including command facilities, air defense capabilities, missiles and drone launch sites, as well as military airfields. Also, the interesting use of cyber attacks. A digital fog descended as official news sites, security communications and critical infrastructure systems stopped working. This was designed to stop the IRGC from coordinating and carrying out counterattacks. Electronic warfare disrupted navigation and communication system, and the Wall Street Journal reported that the Israeli hackers had breached into a popular prayer app, gaining their access to millions of phones, including the Iranian military, and calling them to rise up against the regime. So, I mean, this is a multi-fronted attack using Air Force, using ballistic cruise missiles, using cyber attacks, but also sending that message to the Iranian army: lay down your guns and turn your guns against the regime.
And it's been a very powerful message, as we read there with the hackers getting into that prayer app. I read this at the weekend. It's like the message is to the Iranian people who've suffered for so long: now is a good time. Now is a good time to rise up. And you see the sophistication there. I mean, you've got the might, the power of the American military, and of course the sophistication and sometimes the ingenious methods of Israel. I mean, well, not sometimes. I mean, you think about the Pages and Hezbollah, and in fact, I read a report that Khamenei himself had a dental implant with a tracker, so which is why they knew where he was, and that's why it was a good time, because everyone's gathered there. I mean, there's various reports.
So many of these speculations, and they're incredible and believable, knowing what
that's
we know
the thing.
about
When you see what Israel's done since October the 7th, I mean, you would believe, unlike, if this kind of stuff happened in another nation, you'd be mind blown. It'd be like 007, but Israel does this almost on a daily, weekly basis. But with all of that technology and all of that preparation, last year Israel gained air superiority really fairly quickly, and as of reporting, they've almost got air superiority already, which is freedom. And President Trump is saying maybe, as of reporting, maybe this will be 4 weeks, 3 weeks, could be done in a week, we don't know. But it's been devastating already, even after the first weekend.
No, absolutely. And what do you make about the assassination of the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, who's held power, evil grip of power over the Iranian people now, ever since 1989?
They went full overkill. Okay, and they were not leaving this to chance. They were not going to allow this to be something that messed up or went astray. The Supreme Leader's compound was one of the first targets, with real-time intelligence, sophisticated tracking systems able to pin down his location to his residence. The CIA had a role in this, passing their intel on to Israel, according to the New York Times. There was no single missile, but a concentrated wave of attacks. Israel, in coordination with the U.S., dropping 30 bombs in the high security site in Pasteur Street district of Tehran. Israel Channel 12 reported that Khamenei was underground at the location, but not in one of the two deepest bunkers that only U.S. bunker-busting bombs carried by the B-2 bomber could penetrate. The House of Leadership, Khamenei's office and principal place of residence, was totally destroyed. We've seen pictures and footage of that, I'm sure. Layering of munitions was to collapse the building and then hit the ruins to ensure targets didn't survive and overcome any protection or reinforcement. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Khamenei's compound was destroyed in a powerful surprise attack.
Incredible.
And also the fact the US used the Iranians' own weapons of kamikaze suicide drones to attack the regime that are kind of low cost, one-way attack drones to actually attack the IRGC and other military targets. And it's almost like taking and learning from what the Iranians did in supplying these suicide drones to Putin and Russian forces to use against the Ukrainians in Kyiv. And now we're seeing that the similar type drones are being used very effectively against the IRGC in Iran.
Yeah, I read that, and obviously we've seen how important drones are in modern warfare in Ukraine and Russia. But it reminded me, when David killed Goliath with his own sword, or how Jesus used the tree which Satan brought death into humanity to bring life, how he uses the enemy's weapon against him, and you see that with these drones. And initial reports of the weekend actually said that over 40 of the top Iranian leadership in multiple locations were killed, eliminated in under 1 minute.
Yeah.
The first minute of the operation. That is phenomenal. Khamenei joins the likes of Haniyeh, Sinwar, Nasrallah. He joins the likes of Haman and Hitler. You just look at history. We said this at the start, but it was absolutely incredible.
And clearly, Reagan, I mean, the fact is that the first operational target was the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, really does conflict with the reports we're going out from the Trump administration before, saying they want to destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. I mean, this is a step up. This is a game changer. This is saying that we want to decapitate the Islamic Republic of Iran and its leadership, and then targeting its leadership directly, so it sows confusion into the nation and gives the opportunity then for the Iranian people to take the nation by force. But clearly the Americans are not going to want to commit to any ground troops on the ground in Iran.
At the moment, that's certainly the case, and we have to wait and see what's going on, but I don't actually see any reason for them to have need for ground troops under the current way of doing warfare. I think they can accomplish their objectives without, of course, they do have a kind of ground troop there, and Mossad is very, very deeply embedded and has been for a long time in Iran. There are other operatives, of course, who are there, who are cooperating with the CIA, Mossad, and the relevant forces. But it's truly, truly incredible to see the immediate catastrophic impact on the regime. Largely, I believe we've been seeing a game of chess play out in the past couple of months, where there seems to have been, kind of drips and drabs of attention and interest from the U.S. administration in relation to what's going on. The negotiations, which is like, hold on, negotiations, this is what was always critiqued. A deal? Another deal? Obama and Biden were always on about deals with Iran, and people were saying, hold on, is Trump going to be listening to their lies in this? And they played the game very well.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at now and how the Iranian regime has responded. According to the Times, reported that the Iranian regime has hit back quickly, launching hundreds of missiles and drones in response to the initial attacks, targeting US troops in the region and cities in Israel and Arab countries and who are aligned with the United States. The Iranian regime targeted previous safe areas such as Dubai, home to so many British social media influencers and celebrities. The regime closed the Straits of Hormuz to the oil shipping, which will dramatically increase the price of crude oil on the world markets. And now the regime is set to unleash Hezbollah against northern Israel, and the world holds its breath. Now, we've got a really good report to go to, and this is courtesy of our friends at the IDF, really saying who was the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and this is his legacy of death and destruction.
This is the story of the world's biggest terrorist. Ali Khamenei was born in Mashhad, Iran in 1939. He was arrested multiple times in the 1960s and 70s for participating in revolutionary activities and promoting the takeover of Iran by a radical Islamist ideology. Khamenei was a key figure in mobilizing protests and inciting unrest against the Shah's regime, helping pave the way for the 1979 Islamic Revolution that installed a theocratic regime in Iran. He became close to Ayatollah Khamenei, the revolution's leader. After the revolution, he took on major roles in the new regime, steadily rising through the ranks into increasingly senior positions. From 1981 to 1989, Khamenei served as president of Iran. Then, after Khamenei's death, he was appointed Supreme Leader. In 1981, Ali Khamenei was the target of an assassination attempt, which fueled his paranoia about enemies, traitors, and dissent. As Supreme Leader, he commanded everything: the military, the courts, the media, the nuclear program. Most importantly, he ruled over the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Under his watch, Iran became the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. He is responsible for the countless terrorist attacks across the world, including the 1983 Beirut bombing, where over 240 U.S. Marines were killed by Hezbollah, the 1994 Amia bombing in Argentina, killing 85 people at a Jewish community center, the support of Assad's war crimes in Syria, helping bomb Syrian civilians with chemical weapons. He directed the funding, training, and establishment of Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the Houthis as the Iranian regime's proxy network across the Middle East. Decades of rocket attacks on Israeli civilians by Hamas and Hezbollah, all with Iranian funding and weapons. He built and pushed Iran's nuclear program under the guise of peaceful use. But by 2024, uranium was enriched to 60% purity, well beyond civilian needs. He was just weeks away from completing his life goal: creating a nuclear bomb to destroy Israel along with the Western world. He even set a countdown clock in his central square in Tehran, counting the days until Israel's destruction. Khamenei wasn't a spiritual guide. He was the godfather of global terrorism. And now, he's dead. Ali Khamenei, the mastermind behind decades of bloodshed, has been eliminated by the IDF. We won't let anyone in the world who promises to destroy Israel have the means to do so. Now, it's not just the Middle East that's safer, it's the whole world.
That was courtesy of our friends at the IDF, and what a legacy. That those nations that mess with Israel end up getting messed as well. You want to destroy Israel, you get destroyed yourself. I mean, it's a joyful moment, isn't it, for the Iranian, or should I say the Persian diaspora around the world, to know that this evil, hated man who's caused so much death, so much destruction, so much terrorism, so much misery on behalf of the Persian people, including the entire Middle East, has the blood of hundreds of thousands on his hands, is now finally dead and buried in rubble.
Yeah, it's surreal, Simon. It's surreal, Tim. It's who would have thought 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago maybe we thought, yeah, this is coming. And yes, we've said on this program, we've talked individually. I shared with our Iranians at church personally and privately on multiple occasions in the past 6-7 months. I had a strong conviction that the Ayatollah and his regime will fall within this year. There's been that sense that God is working and moving in that way, and but the first day of this, here I was, like you said just a moment ago, thinking, oh, they're going to just go for the nuclear sites again. They're going to teach them a lesson, try and get them to deal in a particular way, clip their wings a bit, give them a wrap across the knuckles, and that may be it. They've literally cut the head off the snake. And now it's unclear what exactly is going on, who exactly is in control. There are definitely individuals whose names are there of varying preeminence, but Iran's response it's been totally devoid of any coherent strategy and totally devoid of any impact on military infrastructure or on the powers that have come against them. Tragically, their response has impacted the lives of specifically civilians, and of course we've seen 3 U.S. servicemen as well.
And of course you have to mention Beit Shemesh as well, where 9 Israelis were murdered as well when Iranian rocket missile. But if we saw the extent of what Israel had to deal with in June of 2025, when the Americans and the Israelis were destroying Iran's nuclear weapons program, those ballistic missiles, they were far more sophisticated, far more deadly. So again, I think Israel's learned from those lessons, and they have deliberately targeted these missile launchers as well. Share with us, the Times has done the Daily Telegraph has done an absolutely excellent article which they wrote on Sunday the 1st of March under the following headline: "The thin-skinned tyrant behind atrocities from Israel to Argentina. Ayatollah Khamenei ruled the Islamic Republic and beyond with an iron fist. He believed that opposing him was not just a crime, but a sin. The Ayatollah wore a simple brown cloak, shunned luxury. He would spend hours preaching Islamic virtues to differential crowds. He would sometimes be photographed alongside his infant grandson. Yet for all the displays of modesty, Ali Khamenei, the late Supreme Leader of Iran, was one of the most blood-soaked tyrants ever to have tormented his country and stained the annals of the Middle East."
And it goes on to say in that very same article that he inflamed wars, sponsored terrorists, the length and breadth of the region, sometimes on the far side of the world. Wherever you saw conflict and unrest, from Gaza to Syria, Yemen to Lebanon, you could trace a link back to the IRGC and Khamenei. It was precisely because Khamenei was, from 1989 onwards, the revolutionary leader of an Islamic Republic, that he was willing to go to such lengths against his enemies at home or abroad. He believed that he ruled with divine authority, and therefore opposing him was not just a crime, but a sin. He would charge domestic opponents with a capital offence of mohareba, or waging war against God. To preserve his regime, and from those he saw as implacable foreign enemies, America, Israel, and the West, Khamenei adopted a ruthlessly ambitious strategy where he'd forged an axis of resistance, as he called it, of allied terrorist groups across the Middle East, ready to strike Iran's foes at his command. So the IRGC, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, ran tens of thousands of missiles to Hezbollah, the Shia terrorists of Lebanon, and on his command, Iran became paymaster and arms dealer of Hamas in the occupied Palestinian territories, and of course funding the Houthis and multiple terrorists and terrorist organizations around the region.
And now what we're seeing is there's even breaking while we've been filming. Pete Hegseth is saying, as a result of the deaths of the American servicemen, that there's going to be even a stronger push now. And what that looks like, how you can get any stronger than what we've seen already, we'll see. But I'm convinced that these are truly epic days of biblical proportion.
No, absolutely. And we have to also understand to our viewers to understand this, because we're living in a time where there is no moral clarity, where there is no absolute truth, where truth is distorted, and we see an abundance of lies to actually ascertain what's really going on. I mean, the Iranian regime, when they came to power in 1979, in their 8-year war with Iraq, which cost the lives of millions, both of Iraqis and Iranians, the regime devised a plan in order to clear the mines. So they would encourage school children, particularly schoolboys, to become martyrs. And what they did is they encouraged them to walk across the landmines to clear the way for tanks. Then they were told that if you do this, you'll have a key to paradise. So this is how they developed the concept of the first suicide bomber. And then we had one of the Iranian terror masterminds in Imad Mughniya, who took that one step further, and he was also one of the founders of Hezbollah in '82, decided, let's put plastic explosives on people and on trucks and drive them into the US Marine barracks and the US Embassy and the French Embassy in Lebanon, and then essentially take Westerners hostage as captives and hold them to ransom against the West. Let's hijack aircraft. Let's use these as weapons. And of course, where we see where evils existed, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has existed, fomenting the development of strengthening of Al-Qaeda. There were key strategic meetings between Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda and bin Laden in the mid-90s, forming alliance between the Iranian regime and Al-Qaeda, which I believe, according to the 9/11 Commission report, details Iranian involvement in the planning and the operation of 9/11. So therefore, what we see here is that countless US administrations, including President Ronald Reagan, have ignored that threat of the Iranian regime. It's got bigger, it's got stronger, it's got emboldened, and it was so close to a nuclear breakout. So this is where the moral clarity comes in, and that President Trump deserves so much credit for the brave and courageous decisions he's made to decapitate this regime.
He truly does. And when you talk about moral clarity, I mean, believe it or not, there are people in the West still protesting hands off Iran. I mean, even most recently in Syria, he backed Assad's brutal, I mean, we're talking the bloodiest conflict in recent history. I think 500,000 murdered makes Gaza pale into comparison, but you wouldn't know that with some of the leaders in the West and with some of the protesters. This is the most evil man of our times and the most evil regime of our times.
My MP, Emily Thornberry, is in that contingent of, I know, of hands off Iran. You know, she waxes lyrical to a muted and untrusting gathering of the Jewish community at Hanukkah time about how never again, and we back you, and we're with you, and this is your home. But then says condemns this attack because they were negotiating. We were negotiating. How long have we negotiated? My MP to the north, the next constituency, Chairman Corbyn.
Where are you?
This is becoming. This should be like a Purim, a Purim Megillah reading or something, where they're like hissing, "You're over here, Tim," just to get your reaction. Jeremy Corbyn, on Saturday at a march with his brother Piers, hands off Iran. Hands off Iran. We have others in places of power. Others, Zara Sultana, of course, saying this is illegal, and waxing lyrical about the assassination of this leader. You have down the road the universities, hotbeds of moral cloudiness, lack of clarity. UCL on this Wednesday, hosting a memorial service for the dearly departed leader and protesting. So, from the invasion to Iraq, from the attack on the Israeli-Jewish community in Argentina to covering up the chemical weapons used by Assad in Syria against his own people, this has been a long time in the making. And for some reason, no one was ever really willing to do what it took to just go for the head of the dragon.
Because it's fear.
It's fear, wasn't it?
And this is the reason why, for example, Bush's crusade against the Saddam Hussein failed, why the war in Iraq failed, why Afghanistan failed, because these were tentacles of the regime. They were their terror proxies. I mean, the Iranians have their fingerprints all over, for example, the Taliban, and helping the Taliban supplying weapons and arms against the British and American forces in Afghanistan. The Iranians turned Iraq into an insurgency, as they had done in Lebanon during the 1980s. The same tactics, using suicide bombers, kidnapping Westerners and holding them to ransom, providing and equipping and training Al-Qaeda in Iraq that later became ISIS, until ISIS became too strong and was a threat to the Islamic Republic of Iran. It became its enemy. And then to think with that Islamic mindset that they want the death and destruction of the world and the dominance of their Shia Islam across the world, that they are going to negotiate. And the thing is, then you're going on the assumption, as Emily Thornberry, as your local member of parliament, thinks that you can sit down with elements of this regime, you can negotiate, and they will negotiate in good faith. What they say is honest, what they say is true, and they would deliver that. I mean, you couldn't get far. They used negotiations in order to deceive, manipulate and control, in order to gain a strategic advantage. Look, the Iranians or the Indians created chess, but they also are master carpet weavers. They think strategically, and they can deal easily with the useless fools in our parliament, our useless fools in our government, including previous Democrats as well, who felt that the best way to deal with this regime is to actually appease it. But we know from history in the 1930s, you do not appease evil dictators who are bent on world domination.
And thankfully, President Trump and his team, Kushner and Witkoff, I mean, I think they knew straight away, despite the Oman leader saying, we're so close to peace, they knew straight away, didn't they, that they're playing a game. They keep going close to a deal, pulling away again, close to a deal, pulling away again. You can't make a deal with these people. Their ideology drives everything, and their ideology, I mean, look at their response. It tells you everything. They go and scorched earth for what they can with what they got. You know, and their response to their leader being annihilated is they're on autopilot now, but their autopilot says this: we'll just drop bombs everywhere until the end. You know, that's their ideology. Thank goodness it's not Emily Thornberry, by the way, that was negotiating, and it was President Trump's team, because they can see right through that. And this is a pattern they've done for years. So many people have tried to deal with them. This is a regime behind so much of the wickedness and the murder and the death and the destruction and the chemical attacks and the cruelty, not just throughout the Middle East, but also in places like South America or Argentina, obviously the targets in the UK. Yeah.
They work with the drug cartels. They provide the drug cartels with weapons and military training in return for cheap cocaine that they then flood the West, use that money to fund more terrorist attacks and stuff as well. And let's also not forget that this Iranian regime was also the architect of October the 7th as well, the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history, and their number one enemy is the destruction of Israel and the United States, and again the West and stuff as well. So we see that Jake Wallace-Simons has written an excellent article in the Daily Telegraph on Saturday the 28th of February under this headline: "The world's most evil regime is on the brink and Britain has nothing to do with it." Starmer's result to the US and the Israeli strikes on Iran was more Chamberlain than Churchill. Where was Britain as missiles killed the Ayatollah in Tehran? In his office in London remained open. His ambassador had not been expelled. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards had not been banned in this country, even as they were under attack in their own. Iran, together with its allies in Beijing and Moscow, is the clearest global evil since the Nazi regime. Its tentacles stretch into Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen and Iraq, and into campuses, mosques and protest movements of Britain. Yet our response has been more Neville Chamberlain than Winston Churchill. He goes on to say, what will it take for us to call an enemy an enemy? Domestically, the regime has murdered more than 40,000 citizens for crimes for calling for freedom. It has removed the uteruses of female protesters, injected prisoners with toxic substances, executed wounded activists in their hospital beds, demanded huge sums in return of corpses of loved ones. The scenes of mothers weeping over their bodies, over their children, or dancing in defiance of their funerals has been unbearable.
Abroad, the regime is the foremost sponsor of terror, giving birth to Hezbollah, sponsoring Hamas, and mounting scores of assassination and kidnap plots on British soil. Through its proxies, it runs a narcotics network stretching from Latin America to the Middle East, with supplies of Captagon alone fostering widespread addiction, violence, and criminality. Behind it all is a fanatical theology that lusts after an apocalyptic war to trigger the coming of the Mahdi, a 10th century cleric who will supposedly return from invisibility to conquer the globe in the end time. This is not an empty faith. For 47 years, the Ayatollah, who's been killed by a U.S. or Israeli missile, has been plotting to fulfill this prophecy with a triune strategy of proxy militia, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons. And that's where Iran's resources and ingenuity have gone. While its citizens have languished in poverty atop the second largest gas reserves on Earth, more than $500 billion was spent on a failed nuclear program and about $2 billion a year on proxy militias for the sake of little more than bigotry and superstition.
Iran could have been a G20 country, he writes. Instead, in the fume-filled Palestine Square in central Tehran, there's a public clock which counts down the hours to the supposed destruction of the Jewish state. Well, yesterday, while Britain blocked American warplanes from RAF bases because of international law, Israel and the US called time on the countdown by rising to strangle the octopus. The move was bold, fraught with risk. Without boots on the ground, there is no guarantee that the regime which holds a monopoly on weapons in the country will fall. If it does, there's no guarantee that a free, stable and democratic nation will emerge. But sometimes, he writes, evil demands courage. What odds faced our soldiers on D-Day, our pilots during the Battle of Britain? This returns us to Downing Street. Hours after the war began, neither our Prime Minister nor his Foreign Secretary, fresh from humiliation at the hands of the political Islamist insurgency in Gorton and Danton, had even issued a public statement. Kemi Badenoch was clear. She said, "I stand by our allies, the US and Israel, as they take on the threat of the Republic of Iran," and Nigel Farage called the evil regime and demanded the Prime Minister back the Americans in this vital fight.
Amen to that. In less than 2 minutes, so just time for reflection, really. I mean, it's important, isn't it, that we recognise what evil is, and evil is the Islamic Republic of Iran and what it's done over the past 46 years, not only to their own people, but to around the world, including the nation of Israel, and how God sees all these things, and he's not to be mocked.
He is not, and he avenges. He is the avenger, and regardless of what the UK does or does not do, his plan and purposes will be fulfilled, regardless of what happens in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. God's perfect plan and purpose will be revealed.
And to the UK, to the church, to the Christians, as Mordecai said, who knows for such a time as this? God will deliver his people, he will protect Israel, justice will be done, but this is our time.
Amen to that. Tim, Reagan, thank you so much for doing a great job as we unpack a historic program where we're seeing unprecedented action taking place in the Middle East by the US and Israel to decapitate the Iranian regime. We got to continue to pray for the safety and the protection of Israel, the safety of Israeli and American aircraft and warships, and pray that the Iranian people would have the courage and the bravery to stand up and claim their nation back from this insidious and evil totalitarian regime that is the Islamic Republic of Iran. So thank you for watching tonight's Behind the Headlines.